And the economy dominated the agenda as the first ministers met on Friday in Montreal. The meeting comes as the year in politics winds down on Parliament Hill. We're joined this morning by Alex Maheu of Summa Strategies for a breakdown of everything political. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
So certainly there was a lot of tension leading up to the first ministers meeting Friday. The talks were described as cordial, which you would sort of hope they would be when you get all of these politicians in one room. I think it's probably pretty safe to say that there's going to be some tension, though, right? I mean, you can't expect the premiers and the prime minister to agree on everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the good news is that nobody walked out of these meetings on Friday, right?
Because there had been some threats of that,
there
right?
There had been some threats. Premier Ford had said that he may walk out.
Right.
Now, obviously, the carbon tax was a major sticking point as part of the conversations on Friday.
Right.
Not all provinces agree on a carbon tax that the federal government wants to put forward. Ontario, New Brunswick, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan all have said that they would fight this in the courts. And so for the meeting to actually go through, nobody walk out, I would say it is a success. You have to remember, it's just one day's worth of meetings, so not much can actually be accomplished in that. Yeah,
and leading up to those talks, we were hearing the Prime Minister saying, you know, even if a topic isn't officially on the agenda, we're going to talk about anything, right? Like anything is on the table. And so there was, I feel like there was already that warning from the Prime Minister of let's just everyone stay in the room and keep a cool head and we'll be able to discuss some of these big issues.
I would say the Prime Minister did a really good job at stick handling that for sure. He allowed all the premiers to bring forward whatever issues that they had of priority for their provinces and talk about it. Although there was an agenda, clearly they didn't stick to it. They had everybody kind of go around the room and talk about it. And from what we're hearing, the premiers have said that this is probably one of the best first ministers meetings that they've had in a long time.
Excellent, considering how much, as we were talking about tension, and it was considered to be pretty contentious. All right, so we know the falling price of oil, a huge issue for Alberta, Saskatchewan, the Canadian economy as a whole. Alex, do you think that the Prime Minister and the premiers of those impacted provinces can come together and find a way through this?
So what we've seen in the meeting is that certainly all of the premiers do sympathize with Alberta's situation. They have to find a way to get the oil and the gas out to the other provinces, to the port, so that they can get them to foreign markets. The premiers do sympathize with the situation because what's bad for the Alberta economy ultimately will be bad for Canada's economy.
Absolutely, as we're hearing, right? With like $80 million a day is what we're losing as far as the Canadian economy.
It is, right? And so if we're not getting pipelines built, then we have to look at another way to transport the oil and gas. And so the Premier has looked at buying new rail cars so that she can transport this oil and gas by train. Obviously, there's a huge cost on the infrastructure side to this, and she's looked to the federal government for some help. I think they're looking at these situations. The federal government is not quite there yet, but is definitely open to hearing more options to bring to the table to help out Alberta.
Yeah, and we know that Premier Notley definitely wanted that included as part of those first ministers meeting on Friday.
Absolutely,
Okay, so in the carbon tax, as we just mentioned off the top, a really big one, and it's going to dominate 2019. Is it a political gamble to be introducing this carbon tax? Is this the right way for the Liberal government to go?
For the federal Liberal government, I mean, they've kind of brought this forward in the past election. Canadians knew that they were going down this path. They wanted to tackle climate change. Polls do show that Canadians, 8 out of 10, believe that climate change is a major issue. Now, what way to go about it, depends on who you're talking to, but carbon tax certainly is a sensitive topic for a lot of Canadians.
It definitely is. And you hear the word tax, right? We get our backs up for sure.
Right. So what does that mean? Does it mean that, the price at the pump for fuel will go up? Probably. Does it mean that heating costs for your homes will go up? Probably. But the government certainly has to do a better job to explain what a carbon tax would mean to Canadians in general. I think there's certainly some benefits there. They just have to do a good job at explaining.
So you think that there's just the misconception out there? There hasn't been enough education, right? I mean, we're hearing the Ontario Premier calling it a job-killing tax, and then the federal government saying, no, this is a really great thing for Canada. So, you're hearing mixed messages, especially here in Ontario.
Yeah, you are in Ontario, but if you look at Quebec or British Columbia, who've both had a cap and trade system and their own carbon tax in place for quite a number for a few years now, their economies are actually doing really well. And a lot of their economy are creating spin-off jobs with clean tech type of investments.
Right.
So those provinces are doing well. You kind of have to look at other provinces and see if that's the case. The one caveat, though, that I think this federal government needs to tell Ontarians is that with a federal backstop system, 90% of the proceeds that would be taken from a carbon tax would go back to taxpayers as a rebate in their pocket. And that's the key point there, because if you can bring that money back into people's pockets, then that makes a huge difference.
Then they're not getting maybe quite so upset and up in arms. And of course, 2019 is an election year, so you're going to be busy.
We certainly will.